Hi, this is John Hope Bryant with one of my most important discussions with you that I've ever had. I think we're sitting in a moment in history, but history does not feel historic when you're sitting in it. It just feels like another day. But that doesn't mean that the moment we're in is not, in fact, historic. I think that what we do now in 2021 is going to resonate for the next 100 years. Let me rephrase that. What happens in the next decade, this period I'm calling the third Reconstruction, that started in 2020 with really an unbelievable set of activities that happened within 6 months. A global health pandemic that rivals the Spanish flu of over 125 years ago. A economic crisis of unemployment that rivaled the Great Depression. A social justice movement of Black America that's 400 years old. A challenge to our very democracy with the rioting of our nation's capital that hasn't happened since 1812, when the British stormed the Capitol building. This was worse because this was us against us. And so I think we're at war. We're in a three-part war. A war against a virus. We're beginning to turn the tide, and we're beginning to win that war. I want to commend the Biden administration, who has done an incredible job in a very short period of time, and it helped to create some normalcy and some rules of engagement and bring the infection levels down, the hope levels up, and the economy is roaring back again. We'll have more GDP this year than any time since the 1950s. Gross domestic product, economic activity is what that means. So we're beginning to win that war. Then we've got a war that's a cultural war. It's a war between each other, which is really silly. We can take no pleasure from the fact there's a hole in my end of our boat. We're all in this mess together. So whether you're white, black, red, brown, or yellow, you want to see some more green. Can we get an amen? Really, diversity and inclusion is good for everybody. I'll get into that in a minute, but the numbers speak for themselves. I love math because it does not have an opinion. That's quoting my friend Melody Hobson of Aerial Management, that great quote. It does not have an opinion. It doesn't have a bias or a party. It's just the numbers. And the numbers say the diversity inclusion wins every time, economically. But we still are fighting this culture war, which hopefully, if you listen to what I'm saying today, we will get on the same team together. And the third war we're fighting is with a foreign adversary. Sorry, we're not adversarial to them. I believe that there are foreign interests that want to be us. They're at war with us economically. They're trying to undercut us. They love us fighting with each other. You can sort of guess who I'm talking about. But they are at economic war with America. They want America's place in the world. And if it's a fair fight, no problem, right? But in many cases, it's not a fair fight. They're cheating at capitalism and cheating at democracy and cheating at what's called fairness. They're cutting corners. But America, we're going to do the hard work. And I think we can win all three of these wars by getting the battle plan right. We need a business plan for this country and so that we can be a light once again for the world. So here we are in this inflection point. And I think what happens in the next 10 years between 2020 and 2030 will literally set the stage for the next 100. So let me unpack what the first two reconstructions are, if I'm saying this is the third reconstruction. And by the way, if you want short notes on what I'm saying, you don't have to listen to this whole video unless you are inspired by it or you want to have a conversation with others by it, bring other people in, play it, get it on replay and get other people to come and sit down and have this conversation with you about this important conversation that America's never having with each other. But if you want the short crib notes, I publish this online. You can go to the Milk and Review, the Third Reconstruction by me, John Hope Bryant, or you can just go to the Operation Hope channel. That's another version of the third Reconstruction that's more emotional. So if you want a more academic version, go to the Milken Review. You want a more emotional version, a more personal version, go to the Operation Hope channel. But all of it will lead you back to where I'm going to frame, set up, and pay off this conversation. So here we go. The first Reconstruction was really about freedom, and it happened really after the Civil War, and that was a war of the South resisting Northern economic domination. And the South had a really crappy business model. It was called free labor and slavery. And I couldn't create capital because I was capital. I, meaning my great-grandfather, was a slave. My grandfather might have been. He was born in 1871, but my great-grandfather certainly was born into slavery. And so he couldn't create capital because he was capital. He was bought, traded, insured, invested in, but he couldn't invest in himself. He couldn't do anything because he was just simply a product. He was inventory. And you could not benefit from your labor, which is as core to America as apple pie and the right to vote, because, interesting, we're talking about the right to vote now, even that's being challenged, because black slaves were not paid for their labor. So everybody else was paid for their labor, but black slaves were not. Even white indentured servants who came over at the same time from Britain as blacks were brought over, both, by the way, initially as indentured servants. They were given 50 acres each of land if you came over from Europe and you were poor white, not the privileged class. If you're poor white, and I'm going to unpack in a minute where the word white came from. It's a made-up word. Yes, it's a made-up word. The world is 4 billion years old of life on it, 200 million years old with what we call human life, 200 million years old, 200,000 years old of modern human life. Americans as we know it, or people that we would recognize, emerged in North America about 60,000 years ago. With all that history, the word white in this context was created to describe people in the 1600s. And it was tied to slavery, but I'm going to get ahead of myself. So you had poor whites that were brought here from Europe to work. They were given 50 acres each for every member of that family that survived. Blacks weren't given anything. So blacks and whites get here, and poor blacks and poor whites ran away together from the oppressor. And the oppressor had titles, had land. If you had a title back then, if you were governor or whatever, that really meant you're given tens of thousands of acres of land. That's what that meant. You were a landowner. You were wealthy. So the poor whites and the poor blacks ran away from their oppressor. And when they were caught, the overseer said, my God, we've got a problem here. It's a real problem. They're getting along with each other. We cannot have class warfare. We'd rather have racial warfare, them against each other. So give the black man, we'll give the white man, the poor white man, 2 more years of indentured servitude. This is such an important conversation. And give the poor black man, give the black man life. That was the beginning of what we call slavery. It started with commercial slavery. Now they said to the white gentleman, you're white like us, Joe. Not you're wealthy like us, not you're a landowner like us, not that you have titles from Europe like us. No, you're white like us. See, this is the power of education, because that gives you critical thinking. And the lack of education removes critical thinking, and anybody can tell you anything and cause you to believe it, very much like is the case now. 41% of this country plus is high school educated. We got to get more education poured into more people in order to make us competitive and allow you to give the best of yourself and get the best return on your investment in society for yourself and for your family. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So the word white was created in the 1600s really to create dissension of poor people against poor people, right? But he didn't say, when he said to Joe in this fanciful story I'm telling, he didn't say, Joe, you're rich like us, you're wealthy like us, you're a landowner like us, you're entitled like us. No, you're white like us, right? And Joe's like, oh, okay, I'm white like you. What does that mean? It means you're the boss of the black guy. Oh, okay, I'm their overseer. And then this ridiculous conversation, relationship between poor whites and poor blacks has permeated for 400 years. Fast forward. So now you have blacks working on these plantations, and they are giving their all. And by the way, blacks weren't stupid. They weren't brought here because they were stupid. They were brought here from Europe from Africa, because they were brilliant. They were agricultural geniuses. They understood the land better than anybody else. They could work in all climates, in all environments, and of course Africa is the most fertile, untapped natural resource in the world, of natural resources to this very day. So they brought here to this fertile soil for the crops of that day, tobacco, cotton, etc., sugar cane, to work that land. Actually, it was tobacco and cotton mostly, and that went on to a point where you had really plantation workers who weren't being paid, really doing a reverse transfer of wealth, the largest reverse transfer of wealth in American history. As they worked harder, the guy in the big house's house got bigger. They worked harder, the guy in the big house had a room addition. Worked harder, the guy went on a trail ride, call that a European vacation today. They worked hard, and the benefit of that went to the guy in the big house, because you weren't getting benefits from your labor. Okay, you then could not take the benefits of your labor wages and turn it into investment dollars or capital for an investment, which is how you build wealth. And you couldn't create capital because you were capital, bought, traded, insured, invested. And you were more valuable than land, because a crop could go bad back then, and you're stuck. But you could actually sell and trade human beings, slaves, across state lines. This was the biggest business America ever had of that time. African American slaves were worth more than railroads and manufacturing combined in the 1800s. The richest city in the world per capita in 1840 was Natchez, Mississippi. All this is in my book, Up From Nothing, if you want to get into details about it. The word millionaire came from cotton traders and financiers in New York City. So all the industries and the economy was tied up in this slave trade. So here comes the emancipator. I'm going to give Abraham Lincoln credit. It was far from perfect. He had a lot of good ideas, a few bad ones. But I'm going to give him credit for being in that era, in that moment, where there were a lot of weird thoughts of what was normal. But he did the right thing ultimately, and so I'll give him credit for that. He put his foot down, and he said slavery no more, and it ended. Right. So on his watch, it ended, and you had this pivot period. And unfortunately, he was assassinated. Now, right before he was assassinated, you had I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because this is a video all by itself, but you had 40 acres and a mule that essentially happened in January and February of 1865, not far from where I'm in Atlanta and Savannah, Georgia. 20 ministers who said they wanted land, not a giveaway program, not welfare. They wanted land they wanted to do for themselves. That was Field Action 15 and what we call 40 acres and a mule. Emancipator and businessman ran that bank. Never get out of debt at the store, and you never break a profit. I wonder how that happens. So you had a Reconstruction period that got you physical freedom, but unfortunately that created a financial debt. So you went from physical freedom to slavery of debt. But we did go from the fields that someone else owned to the farms that theoretically we could own. But then Lincoln was killed, and bad people took over after that. And Reconstruction 10 years, give or take. So that was the first Reconstruction. That was about freedom and about going from the fields to from the fields to the farms. Fast forward now to the second Reconstruction, which was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And a lot of other heroes and sheroes, Dr. Dorothy Height, Coretta Scott King, a lot of folks who don't get a lot of credit, Dorothy Cotton, Reverend C.T. Vivian, my mentor and hero, Ambassador Andrew Young, who's our global spokesman. Part of this movement of access and opportunity, which really created the Black middle class. and gave us access to jobs, moved us from the farms to the factories, from the farms to the factories. And we started creating a middle-class income, got educated, started going into political life. And that was really about access, about opportunity, about fair play, about freedom of movement. And this was in the 1960s, not the 1860s. It was the 1960s, lasted about 10 years, and it ended like Lincoln's movement ended with the assassination of the iconic figure of that time, which was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., God rest his soul, in 1968. Oddly enough, King and Lincoln were assassinated on the same month, about 100 some odd years apart. Lincoln in 1865, April 8th, I believe, and Dr. King, April 4th, 1968. All pursuing freedom. And Dr. King was assassinated as he pivoted toward poverty. So Dr. King said, "I'm here to redeem the soul of America from the triple evils of war, racism, and poverty." I'm not boring you guys, am I? I love this stuff, but I know some of you like, can you get to the end? By the way, you can just fast forward the video if you're watching it on replay. But I do think it's important to tell you the history, and you got it here. You can go back with your family and friends, your children, watch it or not, right? You can cut to the end if you're watching a replay. Just get to the end of it if you just want to hear about where we are today. So here comes Dr. King talking about, "I'm here to redeem the soul of America," not to save Black people. "I'm here to redeem the soul of America from the triple evils of war, racism, and poverty." And as he pivots towards poverty, he gets assassinated in 68 on that balcony with Andrew Young in Memphis, Tennessee. And really, he gave his life to take down a whites only sign, Dr. King. So now you fast forward to 2020. And if you're doing the math, you had 100 years from the founding of America, 1776, thereabout, 1766, 1776, sort of a founding period. Then you had the Civil War in America. So our freedom from Britain, from tyranny, was in the 1700s. About 100 years later, literally, you had the Civil War, the first Reconstruction. And 100 years after that, you had the Civil Rights Movement, which was not about Black people. It's about America, the second Reconstruction, about 100 years later. And now you have what I call the third Reconstruction, and it's not 100 years later. Why? Because we've run out of room, because we kicked the can down the street about as long as we can. The rubber band has expanded as far as it can without real healing. We have got to stop this game. We have got to heal. And so we are at this inflection point now, and I won't retell the story of how we got here. I told you that when I first started, of how do we get to this point of 2021, where I see social justice through an economic lens. We've gone from the mean streets and marching to the business suites and partnering and prospering, really talking about opportunity for all. And so I've written this third Reconstruction, which is social justice through an economic lens, and I've framed out 3 priorities for the private sector. Now, I've previously written a new Marshall Plan. You can also download that. That's from the Milken Institute, and that is about my proposal for a government plan, for a business plan for the rebuilding of America over a decade, and some of that, to Biden's credit, so he's already done. I'm really proud of what they're doing. I think it makes a lot of sense. So you have the new Marshall Plan. It's a one book in about really public policy. And now you have the third Reconstruction, which is what the private sector can do. And the private sector had a big role in the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement was basically the logjam was broken by the private sector. It was the private sector in the 60s that took down the whites only signs in the Boys and Girls, not the Boys and Girls, in the J.C. Penney's and Woolworths and department stores and soda shops, bus stations, which were privately owned back then. That was the private sector. Dr. King would shut down the economy in these small towns. Most of these towns had Black consumers. And so the businesses were like, look, I don't care whether you're Black or white, the currency is green. How do we turn on this tap again of economic prosperity? And Andrew Young would go in and cut a deal behind closed doors to get the whites only signs down. Now, for those protesting and whatever and focusing on Atlanta right now, we need you to have a more elegant and more thoughtful approach. We need you to talk without being offensive, listen without being defensive, and always leave even your adversary with their dignity because if you don't, they'll spend the rest of their life trying to make you miserable. There are companies here that actually are part of the solution and where Black people work and are contracting with, and we don't want to hurt them as we're trying to send a message. But that's another video for another time. So there's in my third Reconstruction document, I've got and by the way, there's a time for protesting and a time for boxing out certain companies and organizations. But we need to be very thoughtful about that when we do it. But let me talk about what we should do versus something positive versus something negative. 3-point plan in third Reconstruction. Number one, financial literacy for all, from cradle to grave. Okay, because we were never given the math. The Freedmen's Bank I told you about, it was chartered to teach free slaves about money, but that bank failed. Right, it was taken advantage of when Lincoln was killed. So Black people, we're really smart, but we never got the memo on money. We were never taught about shareholder value and entrepreneurship and small business and wealth creation. And we're not dumb and we're not stupid. It's what we don't know that we don't know that's killing us, but we think we know, right? So we've excelled in like professional sports and the arts because the rules are published and the playing field is level. Either you like the music or you don't. Either the person runs real fast and bounces the basketball real good and gets a hoop, or they don't, right? But in free enterprise and business and wealth creation, there are no rules. At least they're not published. And we were never taught. So we are brilliant when the rules are published and the playing field is level. We succeed. That's what I'm trying to do, is create an economic infrastructure for Black America and brown America and underserved America by extension, all right? So one is financial literacy for all, finally delivering the memo that the Freedmen's Bank failed to deliver on an economic infrastructure and economic education for all of us so we can rise up, so we can come up from nothing, as I say in my book. Number two, I got a big plan on that coming, and you'll hear about it, so I won't talk too much about that. Number two, and I'm already doing some of that, by the way. I have 160 Hope Inside locations operating right now in 26 states. I've got 4 million clients. We've invested $3.5 billion with our partners in underserved neighborhoods. We're reducing debt, increasing savings for people who are our clients, and raising credit scores 50 to 120 points between 6 and 126 months and 2 years. So that's what we're doing already, but there's bigger plans coming for financial literacy for all. Number two is wealth creation, Black wealth creation. 88% of all jobs come from the private sector, and 100% of all legitimate wealth comes from the private sector. I'm sorry for talking so fast. I'm trying to get all of this out, 40 years of history on this short video, so you got it, right? So my apologies. Blame it on my head, not my heart. So wealth creation, Shopify and Operation Hope have partnered together to create 1 million new Black businesses. It's called 1MBB, the 1 Million Black Business Initiative. You can go to hope1mbb.org. Sign up right now. We're committing $25,000 per business in a package to help every business stand up of services and products. And Shopify has committed $130 million to Operation Hope over 10 years to make this real. And there are new success stories I'm seeing every day. It's so exciting. Number three is corporate inclusion, getting folks in the boards who look like me and you, in boardrooms, and women in boardrooms, in senior management, in management, and in entry-level employees, internships, apprenticeships. For my white brothers and sisters watching this video, my white men, brothers watching this video, don't feel threatened by what I'm saying about corporate inclusion. All we're talking about is expanding the table and adding a chair. Expanding a table and adding a chair. One group has never been hurt in this country and in its long history are 50-year-old white men, okay? You've never been damaged. You've only done better. My guess is none of that's going to change. There's three things that have never gone in reverse in this country. Real estate value, stock market value, and GDP, gross domestic product. So if GDP, gross domestic product, increases because we got more diverse talent on the field of commerce opportunity, growing this nation, even racists win when diversity is on point. Even the racist wins because they're part of the larger economy if Black and brown folks are adding to economic prosperity for all. So no one has to feel threatened by this plan. It's a 3-point plan of corporate inclusion, business wealth creation, and financial literacy for all that I believe, if we do that and we focus on it in the next 10 years, will have transformational change at scale, along with other things that be done that are worthwhile, necessary in the civil rights area. which is reform of law enforcement and police and the deadening of police brutality, the reform of healthcare, of education. There's a whole bunch of areas that need attention on the civil rights side. I'm not expert in that enough to focus on that. My friends are doing that. This is what I'm focusing on, obsessing on, is going from civil rights in the streets about race and the color line to silver rights, SILVER, silver rights in the business suites about class and poverty. That I can move a needle on. I hope you've enjoyed this. Let me know what you think. Put your comments below. Follow all channels for John Hope Bryant and Operation Hope. Download the Hope in Hand app. Register for the Operation Hope channel at operationhopechannel.org. This is a movement. Join it. I'm out.